right. Hi, everybody. I am Eliza Sherman. I am the CEO of Ellementa, and you are watching now a webinar, like one of our monthly webinars that we really enjoy putting on. We do these webinars for free. The whole purpose of the webinar is to educate you and empower you. So I'm gonna bring up some slides. This is the format is we do a few minutes of talking so you can see we're human. Hi, I'm Eliza, and hi, Austin. You see
hi, everyone.
Austin is human as well. and a neuroscientist, which I keep on repeating over and over. We're speaking to a neuroscientist. So it's very exciting. But the format for this is first a pretty straightforward webinar with slides, and then we move on to a Q&A. So when we do the Q&A, we'll come back on video. As Erica told you, you can type questions in the chat box. We can see them there, or you can use the actual Q&A button and put them in there, and Erica will monitor those. But right now, it's going to be pretty conversational as we work through some slides, some opening slides, and then the meat and potatoes of the program, which Austin will be speaking to. So we're going to shut off our video now. The little technical things that we do. And I'm sharing my screen with you all now. And we begin the formal part of our presentation. So this webinar is brought to you by Ellementa and TruPotency. And Austin is with TruPotency. He'll talk a little bit more about what they do. We're really going to dig in to the real deal about CBD. You've heard so much, there is a ton of hype. CBD is trending everywhere. It's in everything now. People are just adding CBD to every possible thing out there and calling it good. But is it good? We're gonna talk about that. Our goals today, as I said earlier, to empower you with better information about CBD for health and wellness, and also to introduce you to TruPotency, who is a partner in this webinar, and to our company, my company, Ellementa. What you need to know is we're here for you. You're on a wellness journey. You may even be a caregiver, taking care of children or your partner, taking care of aging parents or your friends. You're in caregiving mode just as much as you need to take care of yourself. So we're here for you on this wellness journey to help you get the right information, to get the right kind of medicine for you. So we all need help, and we're here to support you. Now, TruPotency is a very interesting company. I'm actually talking about your company a lot, Austin, as people are saying, well, how do I know which products are good? I can now say, there's a company called TruPotency, and what they do is, now tell me if I'm correct of saying this, what TruPotency does is vets CBD products to find the ones, not just the best ones, because best is sort of like a weird subjective thing, but to find the products that have what they say they have in it and don't have what they shouldn't have in it. And you do this by performing your own third-party testing of CBD products to verify they've got what they say they have. Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You got it. And that top bullet point there kind of gives you a little example. We've had about 700 products in, and we only have about 60 products up on our site. So we've done a lot of testing, and only very few actually pass our stringent standards.
So to pass the muster, it has to have certain qualifications, criteria that you've come up with that you feel qualifies a product as really good. And you're the director of science now, correct?
Yes.
For TruPotency. And one of the really neat things that it has on the site, on TruPotency.com, is a little online quiz that you can take. And based on a concern that you have, it helps you identify the products within the TruPotency database. Again, carefully vetted products. It helps identify the ones that would work for whatever those concerns may be. And we'll have a little quiz in a moment, a quick poll, which actually has some of those concerns. And I'm really interested in seeing what everyone says who's listening in right now in terms of their concerns. But before we go on to that quick poll, let me tell you a little bit about Ellementa, since we've heard a little bit about TruPotency right now. We're all about empowerment. We educate online through these webinars. We have a book club where you can meet authors of wellness books. Coming up on Sunday the 17th is Ganja Yoga, the author of Ganja Yoga, Dee DeSalt. We do this every month. And we have these special webinars like this one where we partner up with a company and work together to produce really quality content for you. Now, we also have offline gatherings where women can come together with experts, be connected to products, so product discovery, and learn as well in person. So we've got both sides of it. We've got the in-person, we've got the online. That's what we do at Ellementa. So now let's hear a little bit from you. Right now, if you are on your computer, you can do a response here. Erica throws up some magic and a poll will appear, and there's the poll. Okay. What best describes the primary reason you want to use CBD, or if you're already using CBD, what is the primary reason you are using CBD? So the responses are soreness, sleep, stress, skincare, focus, or upset stomach. So I think that would be digestive things. I have heard, and we'll talk about some of this later, one of the conditions that CBD can be good for in cannabis in general is Crohn's disease. So it's way more than an upset stomach. It's digestive and intestinal and all. But I have a relative who is trying that and with really good results. Okay, so we'll give a few more minutes for folks to respond.
Oh, it looks like we have somebody from the Bahamas in Canada here.
Ah, that is fantastic. I love that. All right, now, okay, we've got soreness and stress. Well, stress is the highest one, then soreness, then sleep. And skincare, it's interesting that skincare is not showing up that much because as you know, as we've seen, CBD, but also hemp seed oil is appearing in so many cosmetics, and we're going to talk about the difference in a little while. Well, thank you everyone for taking the poll, and let's move on. Now we're going to tell you a little bit about Austin. Well, Austin, instead of me reading your bio, why don't you tell us some of the highlights of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start at the beginning of my education, but I got my Bachelor's of Science in Behavioral Neuroscience at the University of Kansas. I worked in a broad variety of research labs there, first in social psychology, then in cognitive neuroscience, and finally medicinal chemistry, where I kind of focused on non-addictive painkillers or non-addictive pain-relieving drugs. I then went to a PhD program at the University of Arizona in neuroscience. And there I joined a neuropharmacology lab focused on pain, along with opioids, addiction, and also cannabinoids. Because as I'm sure a lot of people are aware, the opioid epidemic is quite a problem in the United States, and finding alternatives to opioids is a big problem. So after a couple of years in the PhD program, I decided to make a few changes, and I went ahead and took a Master's of Science in Neuroscience. And that's when I came over here to join TruPotency as their Director of Science.
Excellent. Well, really interesting and very important work. We definitely are looking at cannabis and CBD. Anybody who has dealt with or knows someone who has dealt with opioid addiction, there's some promising anecdotal stories out there, including one of my business partners, Ashley Kingsley. She speaks very openly about having overcome opioid addiction with the help of cannabis. So that is something that I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about, and maybe even from you, Austin.
Yeah, definitely.
So one thing I want to just sort of set the stage on is that we're talking about plant medicine. As cannabis and CBD are more and more sort of put through a manufacturing process, it becomes a little bit more closer to what we call the pharmaceutical products, or the pills and the capsules and the tablets and the inhalers and the oral sprays and things that are more dosable, more easily, readily, and accurately dosable. But plant medicine right now in its more natural form, CBD that comes from the plant, can vary in terms of how it affects people. And so just keep that in mind. We are talking plant medicine. We're not talking about that necessarily that pill that you get a prescription for, or that you pull off the counter at the drugstore. So that's something we always like to mention, so everyone keeps that in mind. I have a couple of other things that I'm going to just go through rather quickly to set the stage for anyone who is very new to understanding why CBD affects us in a general sense, because Austin's going to get down into more of the details. And then also what CBD is in the most general sense. So we'll start with, and we do this every webinar, talking about the endocannabinoid system. My Reader's Digest version of this is, we all, as humans, as mammals, have an endocannabinoid system, and it's a system that lays over all the other systems we know about: digestive, reproductive, respiratory, nervous, endocrine. So all the other systems in our body have these receptors, and those receptors are part of this endocannabinoid system, or ECS. And the reason most of us haven't even heard of this up until very, very recently is because it was discovered more recently than all the other systems in our bodies and our brains. So in the 1989 and 1990s, so late 80s, early 90s, scientists were researching how cannabis affects us, and discovered or uncovered or identified this system. And you might hear us talk about some receptors. The two main ones that are most well researched right now are CB1 and CB2. There are other receptors in this system, and these receptors are affected by the chemical compounds in cannabis, or also in hemp, which is a variety of the cannabis plant, and those chemical compounds are called cannabinoids and terpenes. So really quickly, cannabinoids are molecules. They're actually called phytocannabinoids when they're in the plant. They're also naturally produced in our body, and they're called endocannabinoids, endo inside the body, cannabinoids. And scientists are saying that it's possible that a lot of the disease that we're going through, or the imbalance within our systems, could be related to the depletion of our endocannabinoid system. And since cannabis and CBD, being a major cannabinoid, can affect our bodies and help us get to more of a balance, that is why people are really interested in the medicinal, the health and wellness benefits of cannabis. So THC is the cannabinoid you know most. CBD is the one we're going to be talking about, and that's the one that's becoming extremely popular. Terpenes are another chemical compound in cannabis, and terpenes are also the things that are in plants, like your fruits and your vegetables, that give you the smell or the taste. For example, I've got 4 pictures here up on the screen. There is pine, which is alpha pinene or beta pinene. That is a terpene that is found in conifers, so in the fir plant, in a pine tree, but it's also found in cannabis. Same thing with this lemon here. It has limonene, a terpene that's found in citrus, also found in cannabis. Lavender has linalool, the terpene called linalool, found in cannabis as well. And mangoes have a terpene called myrcene, also found in cannabis. So I like to talk about this in terms of things that we know, things we eat already, things that we use already. And so that is incredibly important for us to know, because it really helps us understand that this cannabis plant is very rich in cannabinoids and terpenes. Now, since I've set the stage with some of the very, very basics of the science behind why this plant is so effective for so many different things. We're going to get into the real deal about CBD. Again, CBD is a cannabinoid, and it does affect us. But question number one, Austin, I'm going to turn it over to you. Will CBD get me high?
The simple answer is no. CBD is not going to get you high. The main molecule associated with that is THC. That's the one that's going to get you high. But we also have this term that's kind of thrown around a lot, psychoactive. And a lot of people will say that CBD is non-psychoactive. And very technically, this is kind of incorrect. So we kind of talk about how CBD can affect your mind. So it can potentially reduce anxiety. And so in this case, it is going to be, actively affecting your psyche. And so therefore we do call it psychoactive. When we talk about the high, we're typically talking, the term there is intoxicating. So we would say that CBD is psychoactive, but it's not intoxicating. While CBD, which causes the high, is psychoactive and intoxicating. And not everyone experiences CBD or THC in the same way. And so we'll get into some different types of products later that may have just CBD, or they may also have THC in there as well. And we can kind of get into the meat of that a little bit later when we talk about products. And this is definitely a question where a lot of people, I know we have a lot of people on different spectrums, backgrounds. Many people might already be using CBD. Some people might be afraid to use CBD. So some people already kind of have the gist of this, but for those of you who are newer, CBD is not going to get you high.
So here's two little things. I like to sort of tell some personal stories too, because it helps people understand that there's so many variations. First of all, I have to say, when I was just learning about CBD and received a topical, and I decided to try it on my neck for neck pain, I actually did have the fear. No, even with everything that I had learned and read to date, that I was going to get high off of a topical. So it's a common to have a fear of something you don't know. And by the way, you cannot off of a topical get that kind of feeling. And then with CBD on top of that, you can't. So the other thing was, when I did take CBD tincture, the oil, for the very first time, I did feel a little bit, I did feel a little bit altered. I didn't feel high at all, but I felt something. Mm-hmm. And I took it to mean that my system is very sensitive. If I take anything, if I have sugar, I feel that instantly. A little bit of caffeine, more than a cup, and I feel it very, very strongly. So I just took it to be that taking something new, I was feeling something, but I certainly didn't feel disoriented. Is that possible then? Or was I just imagining that?
So, I mean, CBD might have noticeable effects. For example, if you feel like a calming sensation from your anxiety, but everybody is different. And people can be more or less sensitive. The caffeine example is a great example. Like you said, some people can't even, take a sip of coffee without getting the jitters, whereas another person might need a whole pot of coffee to get ready in the morning. Mm-hmm. But some of the products, I don't know which one you in particular tried, but do have small amounts of THC in them. And people who are very sensitive, that can be an issue for. There are products, which we'll get into later, called isolate products. And that name means that it's an isolated CBD. Mm-hmm. And in that case, as long as it's created correctly, which if you buy products on our website that are labeled as isolate, then they should and do only have CBD in there. You might feel something, but as far as the kind of stoned effect that we associate with marijuana, that you probably shouldn't feel that.
Right. Well, now that you've said that, and this is the first time I've had this revelation, and thank you for clarifying. Here in Alaska, when they were first making CBD products, they were not making it out of industrial hemp. They were making it from the cannabis plant and then taking out the THC. So I bet it had some traces of THC in it. And it was just early on in the industry, like several years ago, that you may have just explain the whole thing. Thank you. So let's keep going. So how does CBD actually work?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the CB1 and CB2 receptors. And you'll see a lot of people falsely state that CBD acts at CB2 receptors. And that doesn't seem to be the case. So although we call CBD a cannabinoid, it doesn't really seem to be strongly interacting with the endocannabinoid system. Now, one thing interesting that it does do, actually, we kind of, you showed the image earlier of kind of the keys. So the THC was a key, and we had the CB1 receptor as kind of the lock. CBD doesn't really act like that, but it can interact and modulate the way that CB1 receptors work, which is how THC creates its main effect. So if you take high amounts of CBD with your THC, it can kind of turn down those high effects, which can actually be very bothersome for some people, especially when you get into some of the anxiety and paranoia and stuff, which does keep a lot of people, from using cannabis-based products that are THC-based. So CBD is a very interesting, although it is a cannabinoid, but it's not directly kind of acting on the endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, I had heard, I wanted to say something about that really quickly too, because a lot of people don't know this. If you ever get too high, so people, especially when you're doing edibles, could take way too much accidentally and feel uncomfortable. And if you are in that uncomfortable state, you can take CBD, particularly as a tincture of oil under your tongue. And it can help reduce that. It tempers it. It brings it down. That turn down expression brings it down. And it can be quite a rapid relief for you. So a lot of people don't know that. But when people are nervous about that paranoid feeling or that uncomfortable feeling of being too high, CBD does work.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Thanks for that, Lisa. So we say that CBD is not working on the endocannabinoid system. So how is it working really? There's a lot of data out there on a lot of different things. But some of the main ones that we think CBD is acting on is your 5-HT system. And this is your serotonin system, which we all know of through, mood disorders. So we talk about antidepressants, and these kind of work through that. The other major one is these TRP channels, which are highly involved in pain states. And there's a lot of other ones that it might be kind of modulating on, but the research has been kind of slow, and there's a lot more to learn about this. But just to give you an example of a drug that we don't know how it works, but we know that it works, is something that most people here probably have taken, and that's Tylenol. So all these years of research, Tylenol is used for pain. You can go to Walgreens or CVS or anywhere and get this, but we don't know how it actually works in the body, but it does work. And similar with CBD, although we don't know it works, we can see that a child's seizure can go from 100 times a day down to about 5 or 10. So we know it's doing something. We just don't know exactly how it's working.
And the research is slow because of legal issues and federal issues and such?
Very much so, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well then, when we're talking about CBD, where is it actually coming from? Where do you get CBD?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the cannabis plant and cannabinoids. We kind of split the cannabis plant into two forms. So we call kind of what you think of the MMJ, the medical marijuana, and that's what we call marijuana. And then we have on the other hand, hemp. And so marijuana is typically cultivated to have high THC levels, and hemp is cultivated to have high CBD. Now, the US passed something called it's the 2018 Farm Bill, or it's referred to as that. And this was in, again, 2018, and they effectively legalized hemp. And so they define hemp as a cannabis plant that has less than 0.3% THC. And again, these usually have high CBD. So we are breeding these plants to essentially have high CBD. Now, you can have CBD from the high THC strains of marijuana, but from all the products that you're seeing online or at whatever corner shop you're going to, these all come from the hemp plant. Now, while it is federally legal, there is some gray area still where the FDA hasn't really ruled on all of the regulations surrounding CBD. It also states kind of can diverge from federal level too. So there's certain states, I think Nebraska is one of them, but they will actually prosecute you for having CBD products because they still, anything hemp-based under their laws is still considered cannabis. So if you are traveling, make sure that the state that you're traveling to is not going to arrest you for having, a very basic CBD product. But the way that we get CBD is we grow that hemp plant, and it goes into fruition and it flowers. We harvest that and we extract all of the CBD from there and then purify it. And that's usually how products are made. Now we'll get into some more types of products that where we're not really purifying a lot after we extract from the plant. And that's going to be called full spectrum versus isolate. So I'll kind of leave that for later.
Well, that's actually right now. Yeah. There you go. You're going right to it. So you were just talking about the different forms that CBD can come in, and that is based on how much it's processed once it's pulled out of that hemp plant.
Yeah. So all these different forms here. So we have isolate, broad spectrum, and full spectrum. And so again, isolate is, as it sounds, it's an isolated product. So these are typically 99% plus pure, and this is going to be a pure CBD. Now you're definitely going to see other cannabinoids come around like CBG or THC, and this isolate name is just a form of a single molecule essentially. Now the other easy one to explain is full spectrum, and this is what I was mentioning previously. If you just took the plant and did the full extraction and you didn't purify anything, that would be a full spectrum. And the cool thing about this is that you leave all of the cannabinoids and terpenes, as well as other things like flavonoids that are in the hemp plant. And so when we talk about therapeutic potential, the closer you can get to the plant and the closer you can get to full spectrum, the closer you're going to, or the better you're going to have potential for therapeutic value there. Now, broad spectrum is a little bit of a middle child. It's a little bit weird here and how they actually make it. And there's a lot of different forms on how you make it. But essentially, broad spectrum is if you took a full spectrum product and you remove the THC. So this might be beneficial for somebody who is very sensitive to THC or potentially has to do drug testing. But again, like I said, the closer you get to full spectrum, the greater the therapeutic potential possible. But all of these products that we have, or that are shown, types of products here, we have some form of that on TruPotency.
Okay. Yeah, because it really does depend. We've said in also the book that I wrote with Dr. Junella Chin, it's called Cannabis and CBD for Health and Wellness. We were very careful not to say one is better than the other, but I like the way that you put full spectrum has greater therapeutic potential, but there are reasons why people might prefer or need to go for something like an isolate. So I think that's really important, that one's not better per se, but you get more value from a therapeutic sense if you go full. Now, what about different types of products? CBD seems to be in everything, but what are sort of the more common medicinal formats, if you will, or the formats, not the CBD in the toothpaste, for example, but what are the typical types of products? Right.
So one of the major ones that you see basically every company have is a tincture. And these are essentially, you're either taking a full spectrum oil or a CBD isolate and dissolving it in some kind of oil. And so these are usually MCT oil, not always, but this is medium chain triglyceride, which is a fractionated coconut oil usually. So instead of having like a really thick coconut oil at room temperature, it's actually more like an olive oil or something like that. Mm-hmm. We talk about ingestibles as well. These are very popular. And you basically just take them by mouth like you would any other pill, like an ibuprofen or Tylenol. So these come in, tablets, capsules, dissolvable tablets even. And these are good for people who are familiar with taking, their medication that way. So it can be kind of a familiar form as opposed to tinctures, which some people might not have been, introduced to, I guess. The other one for people who are a bit worried about the way that they'll react to putting CBD inside their body is topicals. So these are creams, lotions, salves, balms, a lot of different forms like that. And these can actually be very beneficial for your skin health because CBD and a lot of these other terpenes and cannabinoids are thought to be antioxidant as well as anti-inflammatory. So you can potentially reduce damage from, say, UV rays if you have been outside too long, or if you have dry, itchy skin or some kind of ailment that causes you to have kind of itchy, irritated skin. One of them that gets thrown around a lot is psoriasis. And that's actually been one that's been in a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but quite a few scientific studies and clinical trials. So that would be a good choice for people who are starting off and want something a little bit simple to use. Now these transdermals, what this means, trans means crossing, and dermal is your skin. So typically these topicals are going to be beneficial for your skin, but not necessarily your whole body. It might help with like a local joint inflammation or something like that. But the way transdermals are designed, they're designed to actually get through the skin. So these products will actually deliver CBD into your blood system. And we carry some great products from the Good Patch. So they actually started with non-CBD based products and started putting CBD into their patches. And they have a bunch of really cool stuff like hangover patches and Be Calm and fun things like that. There's a really great line there. Another one that a lot of people are familiar with is edibles. So gummies are by far the most popular one, I think probably because they have some connotation with the dispensary side of cannabis. But they can put this CBD into a lot of different styles, such as chocolate, other food, beverages. So we have drinkables right under that. They have water-soluble CBD. You're seeing soda. We have a local guy who's actually doing kombucha with CBD in it as well. So there's a lot of fun products like that. We also kind of get into some different ones that might be a little off the radar, like oral sprays or even suppositories. So there's a lot of different ways to get your CBD, and knowing all of these different styles can allow you to find something that's personal to you and that works for you. So suppositories might be, they actually have vaginal suppositories for women's health problems. So a little anecdote, my girlfriend does have endometriosis, and it can be kind of bad at times. Now, she hasn't used suppositories, but that has been recommended to her from various medical marijuana doctors. But there's a lot of other fun product types like beard oils, shampoos, toothpaste.
So a lot of other things that they're just putting CBD into as well to sell the product. So you have to be careful, buyer beware. There's also powder packets of water soluble CBD that you can add to your own either water or coffee or tea, or even into your sauces as you're cooking or something like that. I know there's a nasal spray for THC. So I'm wondering if someone's going to come out with a CBD one. And the reason oral sprays or nasal sprays or something, it's the mucous membrane, right? It's the what do they call it? The mucosoid? It's more permeable. Mucosal. Thank you. Mucosal. Yeah. More permeable in the mouth, more permeable in the nasal passages. And so that means it can go into your bloodstream a little bit more quickly. So depending on what you're comfortable with, you can pick a product. Somebody out there is making that product that will be familiar to you. And I think that the gummies, they're so popular because they're so familiar. They're also very small, very portable, very easy to consume. They tend to be tasty, although sometimes they get the formula wrong and they taste weird. So be careful with that too. But I think that part of that, gummies, it's looking for the familiar. So you're taking something new and different, but when you see it in a familiar form, it's a little more comfortable and comforting. So we've talked a little bit, and you've touched on a few of the things, but let's talk about what CBD can do.
Yeah, so the one CBD approved drug that is FDA approved is called Epidiolex, and that's used for seizures. Although there's a lot of scientific research and clinical trials currently underway. In my lab, we actually looked at CBD specifically for pain and inflammation. And that's one of the most popular and well-studied is for pain and inflammation. And I think that's one area that most people can find benefits in. The other two that have been very, very well studied is anxiety and nausea. And so we talked about how CBD can act on other receptors, and CBD might actually be acting on your serotonin system to help reduce anxiety. And some of you might be familiar with this through some of your anti-anxiety or antidepressant drugs that are act on your serotonin system called SSRIs.
Which is serotonin reuptake inhibitors?
You got it, yes. Yeah.
Okay, and so then what does that mean exactly? So what is, if you're taking an SSRI, which is an antidepressant, what is it doing to your brain or your system?
So typically those antidepressants work by increasing the amount of serotonin that's within your neurons or within your brain and body. And that's called the serotonin hypothesis of depression. Essentially that, low serotonin causes depression. So if we raise the levels, we can have that serotonin act on serotonin receptors and give you, help relieve that. Now, SSRIs and these other things, they don't work for some people. And for CBD, it might not work for your particular disease for you, but it might work for something else. So the best way to actually see if it's going to be beneficial for you is to actually just try it. But there is a lot of other interesting clinical and preclinical data. I know we kind of touched on substance use disorders. So this can be anything from alcohol to opioids like heroin. A funny one is actually they've done clinical trials with CBD for cannabis use disorder. And so, yeah, the main thing here is they're really thinking that CBD might help with a lot of the anxiety and nervousness associated with withdrawal symptoms, and to help you kind of get through a lot of that kind of hard times through the anxiety of that.
Okay, interesting.
So I do want to touch on what can CBD do for pets, because I know we have some pet lovers here, and we can talk about it a little more, but they have actually done studies with pets. One of them, I believe, out of Stanford, they looked at osteoarthritis in dogs, and they found that to be useful for pain in older dogs. So if you are thinking about giving it to your older furry friend, then that might be a good choice as well.
And you said earlier before we started that you are doing that for your older dog as well?
Yeah, so she is 12 years old now, and she gets around all right, but the breed does have some neurological problems, and it can cause some kind of tremors and seizure-like symptoms. And it when we give it to her, it does seem to reduce that. And she does seem to kind of move around better too, but she's kind of lazy as it is, so she doesn't move a lot right now.
Okay. So the next one, I just have to preface by saying we're not doctors, medical doctors, that is. We're not treating patients. We're not diagnosing you. We're not making recommendations, medical recommendations for you. So this piece about how to dose it, we're just going to give some cursory information about it, and it's not specific to anybody here who's listening in.
Yeah. So the easiest and safest advice is start low and go slow. Everybody is different. We touched on that a little bit before, and how you react can be very individual. So give it a shot, start low, and then kind of move up from there. some people might feel relief from only 5 to 10 milligrams a day, while others will need much higher dosing. But to give you an idea of safety and how much people have used, clinical trials have used very high amounts, up to 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams a day, and they really didn't see anybody have adverse effects or anything. So it's very safe from that aspect. And as far as dosing goes, we talked about Epidiolex previously. And so that's the one FDA approved form of CBD. This is recommended for a range of things, but roughly about 2 to 5 milligrams per kilogram twice a day. So what does that actually mean, right? So for a roughly 150-pound person, that ends up being about 70 kilograms. And if you multiply 70 kilograms by the 5 milligrams per kilogram, it ends up being about 350 milligrams. So that's roughly what they are using as a dosage for epilepsy. Now, again, everybody is different. Right. Every disease and ailment is also different. So the same dosing that you might use for epilepsy would be completely different than, say, for osteoarthritis or psoriasis or something that you might use on your skin, where you might need a lot less. They've also done some, going back to some of the clinical studies, they had people who were very anxious and phobic of public speaking, and they found that one dose of 300 milligrams about an hour before they actually gave their talk significantly reduced anxious symptoms. So, and again, that's one dose, but typically if you're using it every day, it starts to build up in your system. So if you were to use around 100 milligrams a day, you might have about the same amount of CBD in your system as that one-time 300 milligram dose. One thing to note on CBD, although it is safe, or it is very, very safe, it can interact with other, yes.
There you
go.
You very much. Hey, on cue, safety, CBD safety. Yes. And by the way, we have about 4 other slides to go through, and then we will be opening it up to questions. At the very end of this webinar, we will let you know about an offer from TruPotency for all of those who are listening in and who get the recording. So we're going to hit safety, and then we'll talk about a few more things, and then open it up to your questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So yeah, dosing kind of goes along with safety because a lot of people, that's one of their major questions about dosing is, how much is safe? And so I kind of mentioned on the previous slide where they've used, up to 1,000 or 1,500 milligrams a day, and it was relatively safe. But like I was mentioning, CBD can interact with these liver enzymes called cytochrome P450s, or we just call them CYPs for short. And why this is important is because these enzymes in your liver break down most of the pharmaceuticals that we take. So this can be dangerous if you are taking other medications, even over-the-counter medications like Tylenol. So one that we do see, or that has been a very popular study is with warfarin. So warfarin is a blood thinner. And it can actually inhibit the breakdown of this. And by keeping the drug from being broken down, it actually increases how much of that drug is in your body. And so the effect is much greater. And so if you have too much blood thinner, that can actually be very bad. The other thing about this, it's not just blood thinner. So again, like I said, these enzymes break down almost a majority of the drugs that we actually take. And so talk to your doctor if you are on medications that might be sensitive to how much you're taking. As many of you know, if you are taking medications, sometimes with your doctor, you do have to go up or down doses to kind of find, your golden spot where it really works for you. And this can be kind of the same with CBD. You have to be a bit careful if you are taking medications, but this really only comes into play when you're taking much higher doses. So if you were taking 1,000 milligrams a day, this might be an issue. But if you're taking more around, 25 to 50 milligrams a day, it's probably not going to be much of a problem. But it's always important to talk to your doctor just to be safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, how do we know if what we're getting is really CBD? Because a lot of people are out there marketing products and jumping on the CBD bandwagon, but is it really CBD?
Yeah, so I'll give a fun anecdote here. When I first got into the CBD business, before we had our TruPotency site up and running, my mom wanted to know why her CBD product wasn't working. And she was like, look at this brand. Can you give me some insight into this? And the first thing I asked is, where did you get it at? And she said that she got it on Amazon. It said, hemp oil on it. And it was from cannabis sativa plant. And I had to explain to her, because the knowledge is really, hard to find. They do a really good job of hiding it from you. But a lot of these products are made from hemp seed oil. And so what they do there is they actually extract some good stuff from the hemp seeds. And this is different from actually extracting it from the plant itself. So the seeds don't actually have cannabinoids in them. So you're not going to have any CBD in those hemp seed oil products. But hemp CBD oil or hemp oil does contain CBD. And if you really want to know if it's CBD, you can always trust TruPotency, because we're transparent on all of that, and you're not going to be getting hemp CBD, or you're not going to be getting hemp seed oil from us. I don't want to knock hemp seed oil though. It can be a very good supplement. It has a lot of vitamins and minerals, omega-3s, and it can be beneficial for you. But if you are looking for CBD, this is not going to have that in there. So look for the ingredients to say actually cannabidiol or CBD in there to be safe. And if you really want to be safe, shop on TruPotency.
Didn't sound like a commercial at all.
Not at all, right?
I have to tell you about Sephora also. A lot of women who may be listening, or even men, may be familiar with Sephora. And you can search for cannabis on that site, and so many products show up. But if you read the fine print, it will say cannabis sativa, but then it will say hemp seed oil. So they're just, again, a lot of these companies are jumping on the bandwagon and misleading some of you, sometimes intentionally, maybe sometimes not intentionally, but I would say more often than not, it's an intentional thing to try to get you to think it has CBD, and it doesn't. So read the labels.
Yeah.
What about the bioavailability of CBD? First of all, what does bioavailability mean? And how do we talk about it in terms of CBD?
Yeah, so bioavailability is a term that's kind of used in medicine and pharmacology associated with drugs and dosing. And essentially, it's how much you take versus how much actually gets in your body. So for instance, when you actually take CBD by mouth, depending on the person, again, we're all individuals and we're different, you can be getting anywhere from about 5 to about 10 or 15% of the CBD that's actually in that product. Whereas if we were to use something like a vaporizer, this actually enters directly through the bloodstream in your lungs, and the bioavailability tends to be higher, around 30 to 40%. But when we talk about other products like topicals versus transdermals that we kind of touched on before, really the topicals don't really have bioavailability. They're not really entering your bloodstream. So when I use the term bloodstream here, so when we talk about bioavailability, we compare it to an intravenous administration. So the easiest way to get something into your blood is by actually injecting it straight into your bloodstream. And that's the highest that you're ever going to get in there. So we look at it as the difference between that instant upload into your bloodstream versus other routes of administration, coming through your lungs, coming through your stomach. We did talk about transdermals that can actually get through your skin and into your bloodstream as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can take it. And the amount that gets in your body is different the way that you do it.
And
also,
nanoemulsion, that's the one I've been seeing so much about now. Nanotechnology, nanoemulsion. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's very interesting, and that could be an entire lecture in and of itself. But nanoemulsion is interesting because, so we talk about CBD oil. So CBD is a lipid, it's fatty. And when we think about oil and water, oil doesn't really mix with water, right? If you pour some vegetable oil or olive oil into a cup of water, it separates. And so it doesn't absorb into our body, which is about 70% water, very well. Our body is actually really good at keeping out lipids at times. But what this does is it's a special process to cause it to be able to dissolve into water. And it's able to get through some of our mucosal layers a lot better and quicker. The other interesting thing about the way that these are made is that they prevent the liver from breaking the CBD down. And so this is another way to protect the CBD from being broken down. So I mentioned the edibles can actually, you're only getting about 5 to 10 or 15% into your body. It's because the liver is breaking them down. So if we do this nanoemulsion, we can actually protect the CBD a little bit from the liver. So that's a couple ways that these nanoemulsions can work.
Oh, interesting. So the last slide about CBD is this. How do we know if a product is good? And really, what does good mean?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about different things, but this is kind of the heart of TruPotency is, we talk about all this lab testing that we do, and we do this because there is a lot of very poorly made products out there. A University of Pennsylvania study a couple of years ago showed that about 70% of products are not what they claim to be. And so the first step is just knowing through our third-party testing that the product has the same amount of CBD that is actually on the label. So that means that you know what you're actually taking there. But CBD is only, part of the story here. We talked earlier about some of the other cannabinoids and terpenes, and we also look at those. So all of our third-party testing goes through these advanced analytical chemistry laboratories, and we get a lot of data back from them that's very interesting, and it has levels of all these different cannabinoids and terpenes. And what we do from there is actually look at the scientific literature, some of the stuff we've kind of talked about previously, and to say that this product has these particular cannabinoids to complement CBD. So this one might be better for sleep, or it might be better for pain. And just knowing what is in there, we don't think is, enough. We want you to know how much is actually in there, and then give you a little more information about what else is in there and what might it actually be useful for. So I think the major thing is be educated and know that your products are actually third-party tested from a trusted retailer. And we hope to provide that for you here at TruPotency. That's part of our main message, is that we do test and vet thoroughly all of our products, and you can be confident that anything that you get through us is what it actually says it is. And along with the benefit of having a little bit of extra fun information there, and extra scientific insight on all those products.
And I think what I want to emphasize is that currently a CBD company does not have to do third-party testing and does not have to provide test results. The smart companies, the ones that are understanding that CBD may become more regulated over time, that they need to be doing this. And it's also a trust issue. A really good company will want to test their products to prove the efficacy of their products, or at least to prove the content of their products. The efficacy remains to be seen per person, but I think it's really important to note that they're not required to. So having a company like TruPotency actually doing that additional testing is very interesting and very, very helpful. I want to open it up to questions, but we had one last slide, which I'll speak to in just a matter of seconds. Keep a journal. If you're just starting out taking CBD, this is the same thing as starting out with taking cannabis with THC. Journal how you're feeling, what you're trying to address. Journal what you're taking, how much, the actual product, the brand name, everything about it, the form of it, when you take it, what else you're doing during that time. And Keep track, because once you start to feel better, you want to know exactly what you've done. So journaling is a great way of doing it. There is an app you can use to journal called Strain Print, actually created by a company owned by a woman. So that's some really good way of keeping track of what you're taking. I want to open it up to questions. We're going to now shut the slides down for a moment. We're going to bring our video back up. So I'm going to jump into some questions. Does TruPotency offer a list of CBD companies that meet their standards?
So we don't have a specific list anywhere, but any of the products that you do see on our website are companies that did meet our standards. I don't know the exact number of companies that we have right now, but I believe it's 8 or 9, 8 right now. But we're always in contact with new companies to try to find the best products out there. So that's a constant battle, as I think there's over 1,000 new brands that were created in 2019 alone. So there's a lot of stuff to wade through there. Yeah.
So we were talking about CBD not actually binding to receptors. Is that how you would explain it?
Yeah, so it gets a little more complicated when you get down to it, but we kind of mentioned the lock and key, and that's typically what we think about when we talk about binding. It's like a lock that has been unlocked with a key. So CBD is not really acting like this. You might think of it more of gumming up the lock a little bit. So it's not actually turning on or off anything. It's just kind of affecting how it works. Now, again, it is a bit of a mystery on exactly how this is working, but it's not a typical, what we would call an orthosteric agonist, to use a very scientific word there.
So there is a question about the USDA regarding CBD. What is the most recent regulations from the USDA regarding CBD? Is that something that you know offhand right now?
I can give a little insight into that. So we are definitely still waiting to hear from some final kind of judgment on various things. But generally speaking, any hemp-based products are federally legal as long as they have less than 0.3% or 0.3% THC in them. Now the food and beverage does get a little iffy because it gets into the supplement side of things. And it's definitely a gray area because we talked about CBD also being an FDA approved drug in Epidiolex. So the way this is being handled right now is a little bit up in the air, but generally speaking right now, hemp-based products are federally legal. However, rules and regulations will definitely be coming down the pipeline to give us a little more insight into that.
Okay, there's a question about does TruPotency sell products? And remember, they're not TruPotency's products. They're products that TruPotency has tested from other companies. But do you sell products with THC?
Yes, we have full spectrum products. We have a few great full spectrum lines. RE Botanicals is great. They're actually USDA certified organic on most of their products, so that's really interesting. We have some new Plant People stuff in that's really great too, along with Populum. So we have a few different brands where if you do want that small amount of THC with your CBD, that you have that choice.
All right, so when we say products with THC, we mean the federally legal amount of 0.3% THC and the full spectrum of all the different cannabinoids in that hemp plant. Mm-hmm. That then will, because of THC, could you explain this a little bit more? The THC can affect the CBD in the same way the CBD can affect the THC?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it on the terpene slide, but we didn't really talk about it in the talk. We have this term called entourage effect. Some people like to say ensemble effect, but they can work synergistically. And so you can kind of think of this as a 1 + 1 = 3. So they kind of add to be greater than the sum of the parts, basically. And this is true for a lot of different terpenes and cannabinoids. Interestingly, in pain, if you just give a little THC, it can help. If you give a little CBD, it can help. but eventually after you start upping the dose, it stops losing its effectiveness. But if you put CBD and THC together, it can actually improve the effectiveness, and you can use lower levels. So it's not FDA approved, but it's approved in other countries like the UK. It's called Sativex, and this is a 1-to-1 CBD to THC. That's typically approved for spasticity in multiple sclerosis, or pain associated with very painful conditions like bone cancer and other forms of cancer that are really hard to treat on the pain side of things.
So here's another question. What's the difference between CBD and CBG?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so as we mentioned, there's a lot of cannabinoids. There's over 100. And when you look at the structure of these things on the chemical level, they're actually almost identical. So a lot of these, you're making very small changes, but the really interesting part from a scientific standpoint is that those small changes in the molecule actually have great changes in your body. And so essentially the difference is just a small molecular change, and you get a lot of different physiological effects from that. So CBG will actually act on your endocannabinoid system, whereas CBD doesn't. So we can kind of talk about that with all of them, but they're all very similar, but have slightly different effects.
Here's an interesting one. I've been using THC tincture for sleep. I'd like to know if you have a product that has CBD and THC in it, and would it be as effective as just using THC?
So that's an interesting question. The cop-out answer is it depends. Again, everyone is individual. If that THC is actually really knocking you out at night, that's great. One thing to be wary of is that THC can interact with and decrease your REM sleep, which is when you are dreaming. And so you might not get as good quality of sleep with THC. If it does help you get to sleep and you have insomnia, then that's great. You're not up for 3 hours until 2 a.m. or whatever it is. But generally speaking, I would say that some CBD along with your THC may be beneficial for you. And it'd be pretty easy to try. So I would give it a shot, and hopefully it helps you.
Now, being a neuroscientist, I'm not sure if you would know the answer to this question specifically, but if we're talking about cosmetics and how CBD is now being added into cosmetics versus hemp oil, which has been in cosmetics for a number of years, what would be a difference there?
So a difference between
CBD in cosmetics or hemp oil in cosmetics.
Okay. So again, like we kind of touched on a second ago, hemp seed oil can be beneficial. It does have vitamins and minerals, omega-3s. But where you really get the benefit from is some of these other cannabinoids, including CBD, that can also act as anti-inflammatory as well as antioxidant. So that's where you kind of get the extra benefit from just having hemp seed oil. But if you want the whole package, look for something that has hemp seed oil as well as CBD in it. But you do get the extra benefit with the cannabinoids of, again, reducing inflammation and being an antioxidant as well. So it can kind of help with skin health and aging just in general.
Somebody was asking where we grow our hemp plants at, but you're not growing, you're not creating your own products. You are selling other products that you have put through rigorous testing. But where in general are the hemp plants being grown in some of those products that you're seeing?
So the first state to actually start growing of all of them is Kentucky, which might be surprising to some people. But a lot of the other states that you might associate with medical marijuana have started to have really big farming communities around hemp. So Colorado, California, Oregon, and Washington. But in my home state, they actually just started giving license out in Kansas. Arizona here, they just started getting out some of the rules and regulations for growing. But Kentucky, Colorado, and kind of your West Coast is really where some of the major ones are. But there's other states that are growing very good cannabis or hemp as well. And hopefully with these FDA regulations, the people who make it through kind of this CBD boom are the legitimate growers who have great product from the start so that we can have great products at the end without any pesticides and heavy metals and stuff like that.
We've got a couple of questions that are a little bit more health oriented, so I'm not going to be asking those questions. I hope that you all address those questions. You can send them to us. We'll send them to doctors who we know for you, or recommend some doctors that you can speak with. But here's a couple of quick questions, and we need to wrap it up, but these are easy to clarify. One of them is, does your site, TruPotency, sell more safe CBD products compared to any other store, like any of those mini marts or something like that? Is it that you're looking for safety, or you're looking more for precision and exactly what they have?
It's a little bit of both. So first, we do want to know, if there's pesticides in there, it really doesn't matter if it has the labeled amount of CBD in it. I don't want to take it. If it has arsenic in there, you don't want to take that either. So that's also part of the step is, safety wise, we want to make sure that these products not only have the CBD that they say that it has in there, but it doesn't have what it shouldn't have as well, right, which can be detrimental for you.
And so some of the things it shouldn't have include mold, pesticides, yep, heavy metals, anything else?
Those are some of the major ones there.
Okay.
Microbes and bacteria sometimes, but yeah.
Okay. And then recapping the difference between broad spectrum and full spectrum. And by the way, what about whole plant? When they say whole plant extract, would that really be referring to full?
Yeah, so that would be your full spectrum. So sometimes people will actually use the entire plant for the extract. Other times they'll use the flower or the bud for the extract. But realistically, we call both of those full spectrum. Your majority of compounds are going to be in the flower. So in the whole extract, you are going to get the flower plus other stuff. But if you're just doing the flower, you're going to have a more concentrated form there. But as far as the full spectrum versus broad spectrum goes, essentially, the broad spectrum, they extract and you have a full spectrum extract, but then you process it to take out the THC. And so that can be done through a manner of a lot of different ways. But typically with a broad spectrum, you're getting the benefit of some of the other cannabinoids and terpenes, but you're not going to be worried about getting high with the THC, or if you're worried about drug testing procedures at your work.
Okay. Well, listen, we have some more questions. We're sorry we can't get to your questions. We do save these questions. We try to write articles afterwards. And Austin and I have spoken before about working on some articles together. So I just want to get through a couple of more slides. We don't have to turn our video off. But just reminding everyone that because you did register, you will be getting a video recording of this webinar. It comes in about a week. So it's funny because after a few days, we start getting all these emails, where's our recording? Where's our recording? So you will be getting that soon. And if you want to join Ellementa in any way, we've got groups. Just go to ellementa.com/groups, and they're on Facebook, and they're by state. And then we have one for Canada. Gatherings, go to ellementa.com/gatherings. That's if you want to be at one of our in-person events. And of course, we're on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. I think we should have how to find TruPotency. Yes, we do. I said we'd have a special offer. It's a $30 gift from TruPotency if you use the code ROCKSTARWOMEN when you go to TruPotency.com, and then follow TruPotency on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at TruPotency. That's TRU without the E, Potency. So that's another nice thing from TruPotency if you're interested in checking out their website and going through their quiz to see what kinds of products might be right for you. Now, I also wanted to mention that the next webinar we have, which is the last webinar of this year, is called Last Minute Gift Ideas. And the three founders of Ellementa, myself, Melissa Pierce, who's in the middle, winking, and Ashley Kingsley will all be on screen, live video, talking about some of the products that we have personally tried, also talking about products that we know people we have known tried. This is more anecdotal, but a lot of the products will be very much based on gifts that you can give to others. Sometimes it's kind of weird to give somebody something that's more like medicine. So we have all kinds of other interesting products too to talk about. But this is really very personal. You get to know us, you get to know the products that we like as well. So ellementa.com/webinars is where you find out about all of our webinars. We also have a book club coming up, I mentioned, on November 17th, Sunday at noon Pacific time with Dee DeSalt of Ganja Yoga. Ellementa.com/book club. We try to make it really easy to find. Anyhow, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, everyone who was here live with us, who is watching on Facebook, and everyone who has registered. We thank you for being here. I hope you got a lot of really good, interesting information. And anything else you wanted to add, Austin, before we go?
No, this was really fun. I really enjoyed this. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So then we wait a few seconds and then we edit out this part. And this is the last piece of it where we just say thanks again, everybody. I know we had a couple of extra questions.
Yeah.
Kentucky was one of the first CBD hemp growers before the Farm Bill, and gave us that information. And in fact, we have 2 new gathering leaders hosting women's wellness tea parties this month on the 21st, one in Louisville, Kentucky, and one in Lexington, Kentucky. So if you're anywhere in Kentucky and you want to attend one of our events that's happening, will the extraction process affect the quality of CBD? That was another question. But we can.
So the extraction process, it won't affect the direct quality of the CBD. It's really how you it. But the way that you extract it can affect the flavor of these different products. So one method might bring in more cannabinoids and terpenes than another. But realistically, if you're looking at final products, extraction method might matter. Like we do have ones that use like alcohol. So we test for residual solvents to make sure that none of those have made it into the final product. So yeah, so they're called solvents because they dissolve things in there. In particular, the things we're interested in, like cannabinoids and terpenes.
Got it. And I actually had another question about terpenes, since you mentioned it. Can terpenes affect the way that CBD products work?
Yes, very much so. So similar to how THC and CBD connect synergistically, the 1 + 1 = 3, these terpenes can enhance the benefits of CBD as well. And even on their own, they might be beneficial. So one of the major ones, like you mentioned, is linalool from lavender, and a lot of people would associate that with a calming, relaxing sensation. There's also other ones, beta carotene, which is a fun name. So
I'm so glad you pronounced that. I leave it off my slides because I never pronounce it.
Yeah. So that one's actually, we use that in my graduate school lab for pain. And the interesting thing about that one is that it actually ends up acting on CB2 receptors as well. It does other things, but it acts on the endocannabinoid system of all things. So
interesting. Yeah. And flavonoids, you mentioned flavonoids too. And I'm wondering, should I have a slide on flavonoids? Is it how, or just mention it?
Yeah, I mean, you might mention it, but right now we've looked at, I don't know how many labs we've gone through and vetted and stuff. We vet products, but we also vet labs. And only one lab that we found actually tests for flavonoids. I can definitely see it becoming more popular in the future. Okay. But for now, it's a little bit kind of on the outskirts of some of the testing and stuff like that.
Okay, got it. All right, well, my family is about to come into the house. So it's going to get noisy here. Plus, Erica is on Eastern Standard Time, so it is her bedtime.
Sure is.
Thank you so much, Austin. Right. We really
Thank
appreciate it. And say hi to Scott for us. I know he was in there somewhere. Hi, I hear him now. Yeah. All right, take care.
Hi and bye. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.